The gym bag hit the kitchen floor with a thud that changed everything. I was grabbing coffee before my morning shift at Hartwell Engineering when Mara's workout gear spilled across our tile floor. Water bottle, towels, protein bars, and a phone I'd never seen before. Not her usual iPhone with the cracked screen and our wedding photo as wallpaper. This one was sleek, black, expensive. The kind of device you buy when you want to keep secrets. The screen lit up as it skittered across the floor. A text notification glowed. Jules. Can't wait for tonight. Future Mrs. Kepler. Future Mrs. Kepler. I stared at those words until they burned into my retinas. 15 years of marriage, and apparently my wife had been auditioning for a different role entirely. Grant, everything okay down there? Mara's voice drifted from upstairs, casual as Sunday morning. Fine, I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. Just cleaning up your gym stuff. Mrs. Kepler. The name rolled around in my head like a marble in an empty jar. I'd been married to Mara Solon for 15 years, but apparently Mara Kepler was the real up-and-comer. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Jules, this one with a photo attachment. A restaurant reservation confirmation for tonight at Chez Laurent, the place where we'd celebrated our 10th anniversary. Table for two, under the name Kepler. My engineering brain kicked into analytical mode. This wasn't some casual affair or emotional mistake. This was systematic, organized. She had a whole separate identity, complete with dinner reservations and pet names, and apparently an engagement ring I'd never bought her. I heard water running upstairs, Mara in the shower, getting ready for her morning classes at FitLife Gym. I had maybe 10 minutes before she came down, which meant 10 minutes to figure out exactly how deep this rabbit hole went. The phone was password protected, but the notifications kept coming. Each one was a small window into a life I knew nothing about. Wedding venue inquiries, apartment hunting apps, a text from someone named Tasha. Girl, you're living the dream. 2 men, 2 rings, 2 chances at happiness. 2 rings. I looked at my own wedding band, the simple gold circle I'd worn for 15 years without ever taking it off. Apparently, commitment was more flexible than I'd thought. Grant? Have you seen my phone? Mara appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair wrapped in a towel, wearing the blue robe I'd bought her last Christmas. She looked exactly like the woman I'd kissed goodbye every morning for the past decade and a half. Same green eyes, same quick smile, same way of tilting her head when she was looking for something. Which one? The words came out before I could stop them. She froze, just for a second, but long enough for me to see the calculation behind her eyes. The quick mental scramble of someone trying to figure out exactly how much trouble they were in. My iPhone, she said carefully. The one with the blue case. I held up the black phone. You mean this isn't yours? The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Mara's face went through a series of micro-expressions, surprise, fear, defiance, and finally something that looked almost like relief. We need to talk, she said. Yes, I agreed. We do. She sat down across from me at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared 15 years of breakfasts and dinner conversations and late-night talks about our future. The irony wasn't lost on me that this particular conversation was about her other future, the one that didn't include me. How long? I asked. Grant. How long, Mara? She took a breath. A year. A year. 12 months of coming home to me every night while planning a different life during the day. 12 months of I love you too, and grocery lists and arguments about whose turn it was to take out the trash, all while she was picking out china patterns with someone else. Julian Kepler, I said, reading the name from the phone screen. Real estate developer. I've seen his billboards around town. Yes. You're engaged to him. Yes. The casual way she said it hit me harder than any dramatic confession would have. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake that spiraled out of control. This was a business decision, delivered with the same tone she used to discuss weekend plans. Are you still engaged to me? I asked. That question seemed to genuinely puzzle her. Grant, it's complicated. No, it's not. Either you're married to me or you're not. Either our wedding vows meant something or they didn't. Either the last 15 years were real or they were just practice for your real life. Mara fidgeted with the belt of her robe. I never meant for it to happen this way. Which way did you mean for it to happen? Were you planning to divorce me before the second wedding, or were you going for some kind of bigamy record? Don't be sarcastic. Sarcastic? I laughed, and it came out harsher than I intended. Mara, I just found out my wife has been living a double life for a year. Sarcastic is the least of your problems right now. She reached across the table like she was going to take my hand, then seemed to think better of it. Grant, I need you to understand. Julian offers me things that I don't. Different things, a different life. And you wanted to try it on for size before you decided whether to keep me or return me to the store? It's not like that. Then what is it like? Explain it to me, because from where I'm sitting it looks like my wife has been shopping for a replacement husband while keeping me as backup in case the new model didn't work out. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Jules. Picked up the ring from resizing. Can't wait to see it on your finger tonight. Resizing, which meant this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment proposal. They'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. He proposed, I said. Yes. And you said yes. Yes. While married to me. Grant. While married to me, Mara. She was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than before. I was going to tell you. When? After the honeymoon? I was trying to figure out how. How about this? Grant, I'm leaving you for another man. Simple, direct, honest. 3 things this relationship apparently hasn't been for the past year. Mara stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. You make it sound so easy. It is easy. You pick a life and you live it. You don't hedge your bets by maintaining 2 separate existences. What if I pick wrong? And there it was. The real truth underneath all the lies and secret phones and double bookings. Mara wasn't torn between 2 great loves or struggling with some grand passion. She was comparison shopping, keeping both options open until she could decide which one offered the better deal. So, what happens now? I asked. She turned back to me, and for the first time since I'd found the phone, she looked genuinely uncertain. I don't know. Well, let me help you figure it out. You've got 2 lives, 2 men, 2 sets of promises. Time to pick one. Grant, which life do you want to keep, Mara? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The woman who'd been managing 2 separate relationships for a year suddenly couldn't find words. Neither, I said quietly. What? Neither. You don't get to keep either life. You burned them both down the moment you decided one wasn't enough. I stood up, grabbed my coffee, and headed for the door. I had a job to get to, a real life to live, and apparently, a marriage to end. Grant, wait. I'll be at work, I said without turning around. When I get home tonight, I want you gone. Take both phones. I made it through exactly 3 hours of work before I realized I couldn't concentrate on structural load calculations while my entire life was collapsing. My office at Hartwell Engineering felt like a refuge, but even the familiar hum of computers and the smell of coffee couldn't quiet the noise in my head. At 10:30, I did something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. I called my wife's other man. Julian Kepler's office number was easy to find. When you're the kind of real estate developer who puts his face on billboards, you don't hide your contact information. Kepler Development, this is Julian. Mr. Kepler, this is Grant Solon. I believe you know my wife. The pause that followed was long enough for me to count my heartbeats. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its professional smoothness. I'm sorry. Who is this? Grant Solon. Married to Mara Solon for 15 years. The same Mara who's apparently been engaged to you for the past year. Another pause. Then, I think there's been some misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. I found her second phone this morning. Saw your messages. Congratulations on the engagement, by the way. I'm sure you'll be very happy together. Mr. Solon, I think we should meet. I think we should. But first, let me ask you something. How long have you known Mara? About 18 months. And how long have you been together? We've been engaged for a year. Engaged for a year, I repeated. Interesting. Because she's been married to me for 15, so either she's the world's most efficient divorce attorney, or you've been dating a married woman. The silence stretched so long, I thought he might have hung up. Finally, she told me she was divorced. Well, she told me she was faithful. Looks like we both got the wrong information. Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's about what I said. Look, Julian, can I call you Julian? I think we need to have a conversation. Face to face. Where? Neutral ground. You know Murphy's Pub on 5th Street? I'll be there in 20 minutes. Make it 30. I need to finish destroying my marriage properly. I hung up and stared at my computer screen, where a half-finished bridge design mocked me with its clean lines and logical structure. Everything in engineering made sense. Force and counterforce, load and support, cause and effect. If only relationships followed the same principles. My phone rang. Mara. Grant, please, we need to talk. We did talk. You chose to keep both lives instead of picking one. I chose to end them both. You can't just decide that. Actually, I can. It's called having standards. Grant, please. Are you still planning to meet Julian tonight? She was quiet for a moment. Yes. Good. Tell him I said hello. I hung up and grabbed my jacket. Time to meet the other man. Murphy's Pub was the kind of place where construction workers and office drones mixed without anyone caring about the difference. Dark wood, darker beer, and conversations that stayed private even when voices got loud. Julian Kepler was easy to spot. He looked exactly like his billboards. Mid-40s, silver at the temples, expensive suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He was sitting in a corner booth, staring into a whiskey like it might contain answers. Julian? I slid into the seat across from him. Grant. He looked up, and I saw something I hadn't expected in his eyes. Genuine confusion. This is really happening. Afraid so. She's really married to you. 15 years next month. Was planning to take her to Hawaii for our anniversary. Guess I'll be going alone. Julian took a long pull from his whiskey. She told me her husband was abusive. Said you controlled the money, isolated her from friends, made her life miserable. Interesting story. She told me you were just a friend from the gym. Someone who helped her with nutrition advice. Nutrition advice? Julian laughed bitterly. We've been looking at houses. I put a deposit down on a place in Riverside. $200,000. She's been funneling money from our joint savings account. I noticed the withdrawals but thought she was buying equipment for the gym. How much? $37,000 over the past 6 months. Jesus. We sat in silence for a moment, two men who'd been played by the same woman, trying to figure out exactly how stupid we'd been. What did she tell you about her marriage? I asked. That it was over in everything but paperwork. Said you were cold, distant, that you'd grown apart years ago but stayed together out of habit. What did she tell you about her future? That she wanted to start fresh. New name, new life, new everything. Julian signaled the bartender for another round. We were supposed to get married in 6 months. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Funny, she never mentioned divorce proceedings to me. Usually there's paperwork involved. She said she was handling it quietly, didn't want to make things messy. Oh, it's messy now. The bartender brought our drinks. Julian stared into his fresh whiskey like he was reading tea leaves. Can I ask you something? He said finally. Shoot. What's she really like? I mean, the woman I know is charming, funny, spontaneous, always up for adventure, always planning something new. But sitting here talking to you, I'm wondering if I ever really knew her at all. I thought about that question. What was Mara really like? She's smart, I said finally. Smarter than she lets people think. She's good at reading what people want and becoming that person. When we first met, I was working 60-hour weeks, trying to build my career. She became the perfect supportive girlfriend. When I wanted to buy a house, she became the perfect domestic partner. When I started making real money, she became the perfect wife for a successful man. And now? Now I guess she's become the perfect fiancé for a real estate developer who can offer her a different kind of life. Julian nodded slowly. She told me she'd always wanted to travel, said her husband never wanted to go anywhere. We went to Europe 3 years ago, Italy, France, Spain, 2 weeks, first class all the way. She posted about it constantly on social media. She said her husband never bought her jewelry. I bought her a diamond tennis bracelet for her birthday last year. Cost me $8,000. She said, let me guess. She said a lot of things that made you feel like the hero in her story. The man who was going to rescue her from her terrible life and give her everything she'd always wanted. Julian's face went pale. Yeah, that's exactly what she said. Same story she told me 15 years ago, just with different details. Back then, she was escaping a controlling family and a job with no future. I was going to be her salvation. And now I'm supposed to be her salvation from you. Looks that way. We drank in silence for a while. Around us, the pub filled with the after-work crowd, people laughing and complaining about their bosses and planning their weekends. Normal people living normal lives, not sitting in dark corners trying to figure out how their entire reality had been a lie. So what do we do now? Julian asked. We compare notes. We figure out exactly how deep this goes, and then we decide what to do about it. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app. Tell me everything. Every lie she told you about me, every promise she made about your future together, every detail of this engagement that she somehow managed to keep secret from her actual husband. Julian looked at the phone, then at me. You're recording this? Evidence. If this goes legal, and it probably will, I want documentation. Legal how? Bigamy's a felony in this state. So is fraud. If she's been taking money from both of us under false pretenses, that's theft. If she's been signing legal documents under 2 different names, that's identity fraud. You want to have her arrested? I want to have options. Julian stared at me for a long moment. Then he leaned forward and started talking. For the next hour, I learned more about my wife's secret life than I'd learned about her real life in the past 5 years. The apartment they'd picked out together, the wedding venue they'd booked, the joint credit card they'd opened, the business investment Julian had made based on Mara's promise to bring her fitness expertise to his real estate developments. By the time he finished, I had enough material to write a book about the creative ways one woman could lie to 2 men simultaneously. Your turn, Julian said. So I told him about our marriage. The real version, not the story Mara had sold him. The vacations and anniversaries and quiet Sunday mornings. The way she'd started working longer hours at the gym, taking more weekend workshops, always having somewhere else to be. The small lies that I'd ignored because they seemed harmless. She's been living 2 completely separate lives, Julian said when I finished. 3 lives, I corrected. The life she had with me, the life she had with you, and the real life where she's the kind of person who can juggle 2 relationships for a year without breaking a sweat. What kind of person does that? The kind who sees people as opportunities instead of human beings. Julian finished his drink and signaled for the check. So what happens now? Now we go talk to her. Together. Both of us? Both of us. Time for Mara to choose which life she wants to keep. And if she chooses you? She won't. How can you be sure? Because I'm not offering myself as an option anymore. Mara was waiting in our kitchen when Julian and I walked through the front door at 7:30 that evening. She'd changed out of her workout clothes into the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary dinner last year, and she'd done her makeup the way she used to for special occasions. She looked beautiful, composed, and absolutely terrified. "Grant," she said, rising from her chair. "Julian, I wasn't expecting both of you." "Surprise," I said, hanging my jacket on the back of a chair. "Julian and I had a very interesting conversation today." "I can explain." "No need," Julian said, his voice colder than I'd heard it at the pub. "We've already figured it out." Mara looked back and forth between us, her composure starting to crack around the edges. "This isn't how I wanted this to happen." "How did you want it to happen?" I asked, genuinely curious. "What was the end game here, Mara? Were you planning to flip a coin, rock, paper, scissors, maybe set up some kind of tournament bracket?" "Don't be cruel, Grant." "Cruel?" I laughed. "Mara, you've been engaged to another man for a year while married to me. You've been taking money from our joint account to fund your second life. You've been lying to both of us about everything. And you think I'm being cruel?" Julian pulled out his phone and set it on the table. "She told me you were abusive," he said to me. Then, turning to Mara, "She told me you were getting divorced." "She told me you were just a friend from the gym," I added. "Someone who helped her with nutrition advice." Mara sat back down heavily. "I never meant for it to go this far." "How far did you mean for it to go?" Julian asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, you took it pretty far. We picked out engagement rings together. We put deposits down on apartments. We opened joint accounts." "You opened joint accounts?" I turned to stare at my wife. "While married to me, you opened joint accounts with another man?" "It was for the business investment," Mara said weakly. "What business investment?" Julian answered. "She was going to be the fitness consultant for my new residential development. We were going to build a state-of-the-art gym facility, offer personal training services to residents. I invested $200,000 in the concept." $200,000. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Mara, please tell me you didn't take money from a man you were planning to leave." She was quiet. "Mara, it wasn't like that." "What was it like?" "I was keeping my options open." The honesty of that statement hit the room like a physical blow. Julian actually flinched. I just stared at her. "Your options," I repeated. "Yes. Both of us were options. Yes. For a year you've been treating two relationships like job interviews, seeing which one offered better benefits. That's exactly what it was." Julian's voice was quiet but furious. "You were hedging your bets, keeping the stable marriage while testing out the exciting new relationship. If I didn't work out, you still had Grant. If Grant got boring, you had me waiting in the wings." Mara's careful composure finally cracked. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. Grant, you work all the time. You come home tired, you watch TV, you go to bed. The same routine every day for 15 years. I felt like I was disappearing. So you created another version of yourself. I found someone who made me feel alive again. And you found someone who made you feel secure," Julian said. "The best of both worlds, right? Passion and stability, excitement and safety. Why choose when you could have everything?" "It wasn't supposed to happen this way." "How was it supposed to happen?" I asked. "Walk me through your plan, Mara. At what point were you going to tell one of us the truth?" She was crying now, mascara running in thin black lines down her cheeks. "I don't know." "You don't know." I was scared. "Of what?" "Of making the wrong choice." Julian stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "So instead of making any choice, you made us both into fools." "I never meant to hurt anyone." But you did hurt us, I said. You hurt both of us. And more than that, you hurt yourself. Because now instead of having two men who loved you, you have two men who don't trust you. Grant, no, Mara, we're past the point where you get to explain this away. Julian and I spent 2 hours today comparing notes. We know about the apartment, the wedding venue, the joint accounts, the business investment. We know about every lie you told each of us about the other. We know exactly who you really are. And who am I? Someone who sees people as resources to be managed instead of human beings to be loved. The room went quiet, except for the sound of Mara crying and the hum of the refrigerator. Outside, I could hear kids playing in the neighborhood, the normal sounds of normal lives going on while ours fell apart. So what happens now? Mara asked finally. Julian and I looked at each other. We'd discussed this at the pub after the anger had settled into something colder and more practical. Now you choose, I said. Choose what? Choose which life you want to keep. Grant, I can't just… Yes, you can. You've been choosing for a year. Time to make it official. What if I choose wrong? Then you live with the consequences, like the rest of us have been doing while you played house with two different men. Mara looked back and forth between us, and I could see her mind working, calculating odds and outcomes like she was planning a workout routine. I need time to think. No, Julian said firmly. No more time, no more thinking, no more keeping both options open while you figure out which one offers the better deal. Choose, I said. Right now, in front of both of us. And if I choose Julian? Then I file for divorce tomorrow morning and you can start your new life with a clean slate. And if I choose you? Then Julian walks away and we try to figure out if there's anything left of our marriage worth saving. And if I can't choose? Julian and I looked at each other again. This was the scenario we'd prepared for. Then we choose for you, I said. What does that mean? It means neither of us wants to be with someone who can't decide if they want to be with us. Mara stared at me, then at Julian, then back at me. You'd both walk away? We'd both walk away. But I love you both. No, Julian said quietly. You love the security Grant provides and the excitement I provide. You love having options. You don't love either of us enough to give up the other one. That's not true. Prove it, I said. Choose. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Mara sat at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared 15 years of meals and conversations, and tried to decide which of her two lives was worth keeping. Finally, she looked up at me. Grant, I choose… Neither, I said, cutting her off. What? I choose neither. I choose not to be with someone who had to think that hard about whether she wanted to be with me. Julian nodded. Same here. You can't do that. Actually, we can. It's called having self-respect. Grant, please. It's over, Mara. Both relationships, both engagements, both lives. You wanted to keep your options open, so we're closing them for you. I stood up and headed for the door. I'll be staying at my sister's place tonight. When I come back tomorrow, I want you moved out. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. Julian, don't, Julian said, not looking at her. Just don't. He followed me to the door. As we stepped outside into the cool evening air, I heard Mara calling our names, but neither of us turned around. Think she'll fight it? Julian asked as we reached the street. Probably, but it doesn't matter. It's over. Yeah, he said. It is. We shook hands in my driveway, two men who'd been enemies that morning and were something like allies now. Not friends exactly, but partners in the strange business of cleaning up the wreckage of our lives. Good luck, Grant. You too, Julian. I watched him drive away, then got in my own car and headed for my sister's house. Behind me, the lights were still on in my kitchen, where my wife was probably trying to figure out how she'd managed to lose 2 lives in one evening. But that wasn't my problem anymore. 3 days later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office with a manila folder full of evidence that would have made a private investigator proud. Text messages, bank statements, credit card receipts, photos, and a detailed timeline of Mara's double life that read like a case study in systematic deception. "This is thorough," said Patricia Reeves, my attorney. She was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in complex divorce cases and had a reputation for being tougher than a $2 steak. "Almost too thorough. How did you get all this?" She left her second phone at the house when she moved out. "I may have spent some time going through it before I turned it over to you." Grant. Everything was unlocked. I didn't hack anything or break any laws. I just looked at what was already accessible. Patricia flipped through the printouts. Joint bank accounts with the other man while still married to you. Credit cards opened in her maiden name. Apartment leases signed under a different name. This isn't just adultery, it's fraud. That's what I figured. The prenup you signed is ironclad. Infidelity voids any claim she has to your assets or income. With this evidence, she'll be lucky to get her clothes back. What about the money she took from our joint account? Recoverable, especially since she used it to fund a relationship outside the marriage. That's conversion of marital assets for non-marital purposes. And the business investment she made with Julian's money? That's between them. But if she misrepresented her marital status to obtain those funds, Julian might have a case for fraud. I leaned back in the leather chair and felt something like relief for the first time in 3 days. So this is really over. The legal part will take a few months to finalize, but yes, your marriage is over. Good. Patricia closed the folder and studied me. You're handling this better than most people would. I'm angry, I said. But I'm not surprised. Looking back, the signs were all there. I just chose to ignore them. What signs? She started working longer hours about a year ago. Always had somewhere to be on weekends. Started dressing differently, wearing more makeup, buying new clothes. She said it was for her job, that she needed to look professional for her clients. Classic affair behavior. The money was the biggest red flag. $37,000 in withdrawals over 6 months, always in amounts just under the limit that would trigger bank notifications. She said it was for gym equipment and training certifications. Did you verify that? I trusted her. Stupid mistake. Trust isn't stupid, Grant. Blind trust is stupid. There's a difference. Patricia walked me through the next steps. Divorce papers would be filed by the end of the week. Asset division would be straightforward thanks to the prenup and the evidence of infidelity. The house, the cars, the investment accounts, all mine. What about her? What about her? Where does she go from here? That's not your concern anymore. But it was, in a way. 15 years of marriage doesn't just disappear, even when it ends badly. I found myself wondering what Mara was thinking, what she was feeling, whether she understood the magnitude of what she'd lost. I got my answer that afternoon when I stopped by the house to pick up some files. Mara's car was in the driveway. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open and papers spread around her like she was conducting some kind of damage control operation. She looked up when I walked in, and I was struck by how different she looked. Smaller somehow, like the confidence that had always defined her had been surgically removed. Grant, I didn't know you were coming by. It's my house, Mara. I don't need to announce my visits. Right, of course. I grabbed the files I needed from my home office and came back through the kitchen. Mara was still sitting there, staring at her laptop screen. Can we talk? She asked. We have lawyers for that now. Please, just for a minute. Against my better judgment, I sat down across from her. What do you want to talk about? I want to understand what happened. What happened is you got caught. No, I mean what happened with us. How did we get to the point where I felt like I needed to find someone else? I stared at her. Are you seriously trying to make this my fault? I'm not trying to make it anyone's fault. I'm trying to understand how we went from being happy to being strangers. We were never strangers, Mara. You were living a double life. There's a difference. But why? Why did I feel like I needed to do that? I don't know. You tell me. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I felt invisible. Invisible. In our marriage, in our life, I felt like I was just going through the motions, playing a role that didn't fit anymore. So you created a new role? I created a new me, someone who was exciting and spontaneous and worth pursuing. You were always worth pursuing, Mara. I pursued you for 15 years. No, you maintained me. There's a difference. That hit harder than I expected. Maintained you. Fed me, housed me, provided for me, like I was a car or a house plant. Something that needed regular care to keep functioning properly. I loved you. You loved the version of me that fit into your life. The supportive wife, the perfect partner, the woman who made your success look complete. And Julian loved a different version? Julian loved the version of me that I wanted to be. Adventurous, passionate, unpredictable. The version that didn't exist. She existed. She just couldn't exist in our marriage. I thought about that. Was there truth in what she was saying? Had I really turned our marriage into some kind of maintenance routine, checking boxes and meeting obligations without really seeing the person I was married to? Even if that's true, I said finally, it doesn't justify what you did. I know. You could have talked to me. We could have gone to counseling, taken a vacation, changed things up. You didn't have to create an entire second life. Would you have listened? We'll never know, will we? Because you never gave me the chance. Mara closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. I'm sorry, Grant. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry. Sorry for what? For the lying, the cheating, the stealing, or for getting caught? All of it. Are you sorry for hurting me? Yes. Are you sorry for hurting Julian? She hesitated. Yes. Are you sorry for destroying 2 relationships instead of just ending one honestly? Yes. Then why did you do it? Because I was scared. Of what? Of being alone. Of making the wrong choice. Of giving up something good for something that might not work out. So you kept both. So I kept both. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, I could hear the neighbor's dog barking and the sound of traffic on the main road. Normal sounds of normal life, the kind of life I'd thought we were living until 3 days ago. What happens now? Mara asked. Now we get divorced. You start over. I start over. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I considered that question. Forgiveness was supposed to be noble, healing, the mature response to betrayal. But sitting there looking at my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, I didn't feel noble or mature. I felt tired. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday, but not today. Fair enough. I stood up to leave, then turned back. Mara? Yeah? For what it's worth, I think you're right about one thing. We did stop seeing each other somewhere along the way. We got comfortable and lazy and took each other for granted. But that still doesn't justify what you did. If you were unhappy, you should have said something. If you wanted out, you should have left. What you shouldn't have done is lie to 2 people for a year while you figured out which one offered the better deal. I know. Do you? Because I'm not sure you understand what you've lost. It's not just me and Julian. It's your credibility, your integrity, your ability to trust yourself. You've proven that you're capable of living a lie so completely that you almost believed it yourself. I never believed it. Then why did you do it? She was quiet for a long moment. Then, because I could. And that finally was the truth. Not because she was unhappy or invisible or scared, because she could manage two relationships simultaneously and she wanted to see how long she could get away with it. "Thank you for being honest," I said. "Grant? Yeah? I did love you. Both of you. In different ways, for different reasons, but I did love you." "I believe you," I said. "But love without honesty isn't really love. It's just performance art." I left her sitting at our kitchen table and walked out of our house for the last time as a married man. The divorce papers would be filed in the morning, and this chapter of my life would officially begin its end. But as I drove away, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't just angry or hurt or betrayed. I was relieved. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe. The truth, even when it hurts, is still better than a beautiful lie. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown, reading the newspaper and enjoying the simple pleasure of a Saturday morning with no agenda, when Julian Kepler walked in. He looked different, thinner, grayer around the temples, wearing jeans instead of his usual expensive suit. He spotted me and hesitated, clearly debating whether to approach or pretend he hadn't seen me. I made the decision for him. "Julian, how are you holding up?" He walked over to my table, carrying a cup of coffee that looked like it had been his breakfast. "Grant, I'm surprised to see you here. It's a public place. We're both allowed to drink coffee." "Right, of course." He stood there awkwardly for a moment. "Mind if I sit?" "Go ahead." He sat down across from me, and I was struck by how different he looked from the confident real estate developer I'd met 6 months ago. Success had a certain shine to it, and Julian had lost his. "How's business?" I asked. "Recovering. The scandal hit harder than I expected. Turns out investors don't like funding projects with men who can't manage their personal lives." "Sorry to hear that." "Are you?" I considered the question. "Yeah, actually, I am. What Mara did to you wasn't your fault." "Wasn't it?" I should have asked more questions, done more research. I should have verified her story about being divorced. "You trusted someone you cared about. That's not a character flaw." "It is when it costs you $200,000 and your reputation." "Did you get any of the money back?" Julian laughed bitterly. "She spent it, all of it. The apartment deposit, the business investment, the engagement ring. Gone." "Where is she now?" "Last I heard, she moved to Phoenix. Started over with a new name, new job, new life." "New name?" "She's using her maiden name now, Mara Chen. Clean slate, fresh start, no messy history to explain." I thought about that. It made sense, in a way. If you'd burned through 2 identities in one city, the logical next step was to create a third identity somewhere else. "Have you heard from her?" "She tried to contact me a few months ago. Wanted to explain, to apologize, to make things right somehow." "What did you tell her?" "Nothing. I had my lawyer send her a cease and desist letter." "Probably smart." "What about you? Has she tried to contact you?" "Once. Right after the divorce was finalized. She wanted to know if we could be friends." "Friends." That's what she said. Like 15 years of marriage and a year of systematic deception was just some kind of misunderstanding that we could laugh about over coffee. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that friendship requires trust, and trust requires honesty, and she'd proven herself incapable of both." Julian nodded. "Good answer." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, 2 men who'd been through the same storm and somehow ended up on the same shore. It was strange, but I realized I felt more kinship with Julian than I did with most of my old friends. He understood something about betrayal that people in normal relationships never would. "Can I ask you something?" Julian said finally. "Sure." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if she'd just been honest from the beginning?" "You mean, if she'd divorced me before she started dating you?" "Yeah. If she'd handled it like a normal person instead of trying to have everything at once." I'd thought about that question a lot over the past 6 months. I think she would have been happy for a while. With you, I mean. You offered her something I couldn't. "What's that?" "The excitement of being pursued, The thrill of being someone's first choice instead of their comfortable habit. But eventually, you would have become the comfortable habit, and she would have started looking for someone new to make her feel special again. You think she's incapable of being faithful? I think she's incapable of being satisfied. There's a difference. Julian stirred his coffee thoughtfully. My therapist says some people are addicted to the early stages of relationships. The romance, the uncertainty, the feeling of being desired. Once that fades, they get bored and start looking for their next fix. Your therapist sounds smart. She is. She's helping me understand how I ended up in that situation in the first place. And? Turns out I have a pattern of dating women who need rescuing. Makes me feel important, valuable, like I'm the hero of their story. And Mara needed rescuing from her terrible marriage. Exactly. I got to be the knight in shining armor, saving the beautiful princess from her cold, distant husband. Except her husband wasn't cold or distant. No, he was just human. That hit me harder than I expected. Human. Flawed. Imperfect. Sometimes boring. Like the rest of us. I thought about my marriage, about the comfortable routines and quiet evenings and small irritations that had made up our daily life. It hadn't been a fairy tale, but it had been real. Or at least, my part of it had been real. Do you miss her? Julian asked. I miss who I thought she was. Yeah, me too. Do you think she misses us? I think she misses the attention. Having two men competing for her, making her feel like the most desirable woman in the world. But not us, specifically. Not us, specifically. We finished our coffee in silence. Around us, the Saturday morning crowd was doing normal Saturday morning things. Reading newspapers, meeting friends, planning their weekends. People with ordinary problems and ordinary relationships and ordinary lives that didn't require spreadsheets to keep track of. I should go, Julian said finally. I'm meeting with a potential investor this afternoon, trying to rebuild what I lost. Good luck. Thanks. He stood up, then hesitated. Grant? Yeah? I know this sounds strange, but I'm glad we talked that day at Murphy's. I'm glad we compared notes instead of letting her play us against each other. Me too. If we'd both stayed in the dark, she might have kept it going for years. Probably. So thank you. For being honest, for being decent, for not making me the enemy. Thank you for the same. We shook hands, and Julian walked away. I watched him through the coffee shop window as he got into his car and drove off, heading toward whatever came next in his life. I stayed at my table for another hour, reading the paper and thinking about the strange turns life can take. 6 months ago, I'd been married to a woman I thought I knew, living a life I thought was real. Now I was divorced, alone, and somehow happier than I'd been in years. The truth, it turned out, really was better than a beautiful lie. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a split second, my heart jumped, thinking it might be Mara. But it was my sister Tina, asking if I wanted to come to dinner Sunday night. I texted back, yes, thanks. Real relationships, I was learning, were built on small things. Dinner invitations and honest conversations and the simple pleasure of being with people who knew who you really were and liked you anyway. It wasn't